Okay, so have you ever had that feeling like you're trying to figure out how to keep your, all your stuff online safe and sound,
Yeah,
but it's like so complicated and it almost feels like you need, I don't know, some kind of like top secret decoder ring or something
totally.
just to get even the basics. It can be so overwhelming.
Yeah.
But the thing is, you want to know this stuff.
Yeah, you do. You want to be informed. You want to know how it all works.
Right. We all want to be in the know, especially when it comes to keeping our digital lives secure.
Absolutely.
We don't want to be left in the dark, right?
No, you don't. And,
Yeah.
and that's exactly why we're here.
That's right. We're diving deep today, folks.
Deep dive, yeah. Think of this as your shortcut to really understanding the core of what security is all about. We've done all the hard work for you, all the reading, the research. We've waded through all the technical jargon,
Oh, yeah.
all those long, boring manuals, and we've pulled out the really juicy bits, the stuff you actually need to know.
Exactly. We've taken this mountain of security information and we've distilled it down to the pure, potent stuff.
Pure potent stuff.
The good stuff. The stuff that's going to make you say, aha, now I get it.
Uh-huh.
And today, we're tackling some pretty big concepts. The CIA Triad.
Ooh, yeah.
.0 trust. Even getting into how physical barriers play a role in all of this. It's a lot, but trust me, it's going to be fascinating.
Yeah, it is. It is.
And don't worry, we're going to keep things light and engaging, and we'll make sure you leave here feeling like you've actually learned something useful, something that you can apply to your own digital life.
Okay, well, to kick things off, let's start with what many consider the very foundation of digital security,
Okay.
the CIA Triad. Now, don't worry, this has nothing to do with spies or secret agents.
Okay.
The CIA refers to three core principles:
Okay.
confidentiality, integrity, and availability. These are the three pillars, if you will, that any secure system is built on.
Got it. CIA, confidentiality, integrity, availability. Sounds serious. Let's start with confidentiality. What exactly does that mean in the world of digital security?
Well, confidentiality at its core is all about keeping sensitive information secret. Making sure that only the people who are authorized to see it actually can see it.
Okay, so kind of like having a password on your phone.
Exactly. Or keeping a diary locked, that kind of thing. It's like a digital lockbox for all your valuable data, like, secret company information, your financial details, anything that you really don't want falling into the wrong hands.
Makes sense. So what about integrity then? That sounds a bit like making sure that things are, well, honest, I guess.
Yeah, you got it. Integrity is all about ensuring that your data remains unaltered and trustworthy. It's about preventing any unauthorized changes or tampering. So, you can be confident that the information you're seeing is the real deal, that it hasn't been messed with along the way.
Okay, that's definitely important. I mean, I wouldn't want someone changing the numbers on my bank statements. So how do we actually ensure that integrity, though, in the digital world?
Well, that's where these clever tools called hashing algorithms come in. You might have heard of things like SHA-1 or MD5. They're like creating a unique digital fingerprint for a piece of data. So even if the tiniest bit of that data changes, like adding a comma or something, the fingerprint changes completely. It's like this instant red flag that something's not right. It's like if you had a perfect photocopy of a document and then someone scribbled on it.
Oh.
The fingerprint of the original and the scribbled one would be totally different.
So it's like a built-in way to spot if something's been tampered with.
Exactly.
Okay, got it. And then the last one, availability. That one seems pretty straightforward. It's all about things being there when you need them, right?
Exactly. Availability is about guaranteeing that your digital resources, like your files, your systems, your services, are all accessible when you need them. So systems are up and running, data can be retrieved quickly, and online services stay online. If a website crashes right when you're trying to buy concert tickets, that's a failure of availability. Or if you can't access your important work files when you need them.
Yeah, that's definitely frustrating. So these three, confidentiality, integrity, and availability, they're all connected then. Like they work together as a team.
Absolutely, they do. They're like a superhero team.
Yeah.
They have to work together to protect your digital world. But sometimes, strengthening one can have an effect on the others. Like, for example, if you make something super confidential with really strong encryption, it might slow things down a bit. So designing a really secure system is all about finding the right balance between these three principles.
It's like a balancing act.
It is.
Okay, so we've got the CIA Triad down. What's next?
Well, the next concept we came across is called non-repudiation.
Non-repudiation. Okay, that sounds a bit
legal.
It does, doesn't it? But it's a really important security concept. It's all about building trust in the digital world. Basically, non-repudiation makes it impossible for someone to deny they took a particular action online. It's about accountability. So, let's say you send a super important email. Non-repudiation would give you undeniable proof that you sent it and that the other person received it. So neither of you could later say, nope, never happened.
Okay, I see. So it's like having a receipt for every digital interaction.
Right.
How do we actually achieve that, though, in like the real world of computers and networks?
Well, there are a few key ways. One is through digital signatures.
Okay.
They use cryptography to create a unique link between the sender and the content, proving who sent it and that it hasn't been altered in any way. Then there are audit trails.
Okay.
These are like really detailed logs that track all the activity within a system.
Okay.
So who logged in, what files they accessed, what changes they made, all with timestamps.
So it's kind of like a digital paper trail.
That can't be erased. The source even gave the example of e-commerce. How does non-repudiation make online shopping safer?
Well, when you buy something online and you use a digital signature during the transaction, it creates this record that you authorized that purchase at that specific time for that specific amount. So the seller can't come back later and say, oh, no, we never agreed to that price. And you can't deny that you made the purchase either.
Right, so it protects both the buyer and the seller.
Exactly. It creates this environment of trust, which is really important for online transactions.
Okay, yeah, trust is definitely a big thing when you're shopping online. Now, moving on, we encountered this acronym, AAA. It stands for Authentication, Authorization, and Accounting. Sounds like a top-notch security rating.
It kind of is. Think of it as this robust security system. It controls who gets into a system or a network.
Okay.
And what they can do once they're inside.
Yeah.
So let's break it down. First, we have authentication. This is all about verifying who you are. It's like showing your ID in the digital world. It's the system asking, okay, who are you, really?
So like when you type in your username and password to log into your email.
Exactly. Or when you use facial recognition on your phone. That's authentication in action. The system is checking to make sure you are who you say you are. The source even mentioned these things called AAA servers. They act as central checkpoints for this, especially in bigger organizations.
Okay.
So, for example, in a company that uses Windows, when you try to log in, a AAA server might check with what's called the domain controller, which is basically the master list of all the users, to verify that your username and password are correct. And it's not just people that need to be authenticated. Systems can also authenticate each other.
Right.
Using special frameworks and protocols like 802.1x. Often this involves digital certificates on devices. It's like a digital hall pass.
Okay, so once the system knows it's really me, authentication's done, what's next?
Well, next comes authorization. This step answers the question, okay, we know who you are, but what are you actually allowed to do? Just because you've proven your identity doesn't mean you get to do whatever you want. Authorization defines what actions an authenticated user or system can perform within the network.
Got it. So it's like at my work, the people in accounting can access all the financial spreadsheets, but me in marketing, I shouldn't be able to see any of that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's a perfect example of authorization. It's about making sure that people only have access to the information and resources that they absolutely need to do their job.
Yeah.
And nothing more.
Right. So you wouldn't want like the new intern having access to the entire company's database.
Definitely not.
Okay. So we've got authentication, figuring out who someone is, and then we've got authorization, deciding what they can do. What about that last A, accounting? Sounds a bit like bookkeeping.
It is. Accounting is all about keeping a record of what's happened.
Yeah.
It captures details like usernames, timestamps, IP addresses, which files or systems were accessed, and what actions were performed. And all of this information is stored securely and can be used for a bunch of things.
Yeah.
Like real-time monitoring to spot anything suspicious, going back and reviewing what happened if there's a security incident, even generating reports to make sure the company's complying with regulations.
So it's like having a security camera that's always running in the background, and it's keeping this log of all the digital activity.
Exactly. A digital trail.
And if something goes wrong, you can go back and see exactly what happened and who did what.
Precisely. Now, all of this AAA magic is often powered by specific protocols.
Oh, okay.
You know, the rules that govern how it all works. The source mentioned radius, diameter, and tech STS plus A.
Those sound a bit technical.
Yeah, they are. But think of them as the rule books that AAA clients, like your laptop when it's trying to connect to the Wi-Fi,
Yeah.
and AAA servers use to communicate securely.
Okay, can you give me a quick rundown of each one in plain English?
Sure. So RADIUS, that stands for Remote Authentication Dial-In User Service. It's kind of the old timer in the world of AAA. It's commonly used for managing remote access. So like when you're connecting to your company's network from home using a VPN, your computer would act as a RADIUS client, sending your login details to a RADIUS server to be verified. And a key part of keeping that communication secure is what's called a shared secret. It's like a secret code that only the client and the server know.
Okay, got it. Remote access, think radius,
Right.
and shared secrets.
Exactly. Now, diameter, that's a bit more modern. It's kind of like the next generation of radius, designed to handle the demands of today's networks, like 4G and 5G. So things like cell towers and more advanced Wi-Fi systems, they'd often be acting as diameter clients. And just like with radius, there's that shared secret element to keep everything secure.
Okay, so diameter is like the updated, more powerful version for all the wireless stuff.
Exactly.
What about TACAS Plus?
That one, that stands for Terminal Access Control or Access Control System Plus.
Okay.
It's a mouthful. And it's typically used to manage network devices themselves, things like routers, switches, firewalls. It was originally developed by Cisco, and it's used to manage who can log in and make changes to these crucial network components.
Okay, so this one is more for the IT folks,
Yeah, usually.
ones managing the network equipment.
Exactly. And guess what? It also relies on that shared secret concept to make sure that the communication between the clients, those network devices, and the TileCast Plus server is secure.
Okay, so shared secret is like the secret handshake.
Exactly.
Only members of the club know it.
Exactly. It's all about trust,
Yeah.
making sure that when your device is talking to the security server, they can trust each other because they both know the secret code.
Got it. Okay, so we've covered the core principles and how we control who gets in and what they can do. Now, the source also mentioned gap analysis. What is that all about?
Gap analysis is a process where an organization compares its current security practices to establish standards, regulations, best practices. And the goal is to find those gaps, the places where their current security falls short.
So it's like a security checkup?
It is, yeah. It's like a report card highlighting the areas where they need to improve.
Okay, how does that actually work?
Well, it usually starts with an assessment. Figure out what security measures, policies, and technology the organization already has in place. Then they do some benchmarking, comparing those practices to industry standards and legal requirements. And then they identify the specific gaps where their security isn't quite up to par. And from there, they prioritize those gaps. They figure out which ones are the most critical, the ones that pose the biggest risk. And then they come up with a plan to address those gaps to improve their security. And this isn't just a one-time thing. It's an ongoing process because threats are constantly evolving, new vulnerabilities emerge, and security best practices change over time. So organizations need to regularly reassess their security to make sure they're still protected.
So it's kind of like constantly checking your tires, making sure they're properly inflated.
Exactly.
Okay. Now let's talk about this next concept. It sounds really intriguing. Zero trust.
Yes. Zero trust.
Very dramatic name.
It is. It's a big shift in how we think about security. It's based on this principle of never trust, always verify. So it challenges the old way of thinking, where everything inside a company's network was automatically trusted.
Okay.
With zero trust, every user, every device, every application, everything that's trying to access resources is treated as potentially untrustworthy.
Okay.
And it has to be verified every time it tries to connect, no matter where it's coming from.
So even if something is already inside the company's network, we still don't just assume it's safe?
Exactly. That's the key idea. No more blind trust. And the source connects this to the idea of separating the data plane and the control plane.
Okay, what are those?
Well, think of the data plane as the highway where all the data travels.
Okay.
It's all about moving data packets. The control plane, on the other hand, that's the brain of the network.
Okay.
That's where security decisions are made. It's like the command center.
Okay.
And just like zero trust eliminates those assumptions about who to trust, separating those planes helps eliminate assumptions about how data flows and how the network's managed.
Okay, so let's dig into this control plane a little bit more. What exactly does it do?
Well, it's all about making security decisions. It uses information about who or what is trying to access the network, their identity, along with the organization's security policies, then the latest threat intelligence, to decide whether or not to allow access. It's where the rules of the game are defined and enforced.
Okay.
Now, you mentioned adaptive identity earlier. That's part of this. Traditional identity management is all about assigning fixed roles and permissions. Adaptive identity, it takes a more dynamic approach.
Okay.
So a user's privileges are adjusted based on the context.
Okay.
It looks at things like their behavior patterns, their location, the device they're using. So for example, if you usually log in from your office computer during work hours, the system is going to trust that login more than a login from a brand new device in a different country late at night.
Right. Makes sense. So it's constantly adapting to the situation.
Exactly. And another important aspect of the control plane is something called threat scope reduction.
Okay. Threat scope reduction.
This is all about minimizing the areas that an attacker could potentially exploit. So reducing the number of exposed services, keeping software as minimal as possible, patching vulnerabilities, things like that.
So it's like making your house less appealing to burglars by like locking all the doors and windows.
Exactly. You're basically making it harder for them to find a way in.
Because
And a key part of all of this is policy-driven access control. So instead of having to manually check and make decisions every time someone tries to access something, the system automatically enforces those predefined rules.
okay, so it's like setting up the ground rules and then letting the system do its job.
Precisely. Now, within the control plane, there are a few key players: the policy engine, the policy administrator, and the policy enforcement point.
It does sound very official. So what do each of these players do?
Well, the policy engine, that's the brain that makes the actual decisions about who gets access to what. And it does this in real time, taking into account all sorts of information like security policies, threat intelligence data, details about the user, their device, all of that. And then it passes its decision on to the policy administrator.
Okay, so the policy engine is the one saying yes or no.
Right. And then the policy administrator takes those decisions and makes them happen.
Okay.
It issues the access tokens, the digital keys, that let users and devices onto the network.
Wow.
And it communicates those decisions to the policy enforcement point,
Okay.
which is like the guard at the gate. It's the
Mhm.
one that actually enforces the rules, allowing or blocking connections, preventing any breaches.
So the policy engine decides, the policy administrator tells everyone what to do, and the policy enforcement point actually makes it happen.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's the control plane, making the decisions and enforcing the rules. What about the data plane?
Well, the data plane is where the action happens. It's responsible for actually moving those data packets around the network, routing them to the right places, making sure everything flows smoothly according to the rules set by the control plane.
Okay, got it. And within the data plane, the source mentioned subjects and systems.
Yes.
What are those?
Well, subjects, those are the entities that initiate communication,
Okay.
like a user on their computer or an application that's trying to access data.
Okay.
Systems, on the other hand, they're the infrastructure.
Oh.
Routers, switches, firewalls, servers. They process those data packets, make sure everything runs smoothly.
Okay, so subjects start the conversation, and systems make sure it gets to the right place.
Precisely.
Now, the source also mentioned trust zones. That sounds a bit abstract. Can you explain that in simple terms?
Sure. Think of trust zones as a way of dividing the network into different areas based on how much trust we assume within those areas.
Okay.
So, for example, there's this concept of an implicit trust zone,
Okay.
where we assume a certain level of trust without having to constantly re-verify everything.
Okay, so like the device is connected to my home Wi-Fi. They're probably in an implicit trust zone.
Exactly, because they're all on the same network, and we generally assume they can trust each other. Now, contrast that with a device connecting from a public Wi-Fi network.
Right. Less trust there.
Much less trust.
Okay.
Now, within a larger organization, you might have an internal network zone. This is the part of the network that's behind the firewall. Traditionally, this has been considered a more trustworthy zone. But then you have the DMZ, the demilitarized zone. It's like a buffer zone between the trusted internal network and the untrusted external world, like the internet.
Okay.
It's where you might host services that need to be accessible from the outside, like web servers or email servers. But it's designed to prevent attackers from easily moving into the internal network.
So it's like a security checkpoint
Yeah,
before you get to the really sensitive stuff.
exactly. And then, of course, you have the external network zone, which is basically the internet.
Okay.
And it's generally considered untrusted. So communication between the internal network and the external network needs to be carefully controlled.
Right. So basically, trust zones are all about understanding the different levels of trust that we have in different parts of the network and applying the right security measures to each zone.
Exactly. It's like a city. You have different neighborhoods with different levels of security.
Right. Makes sense.
Some are gated communities, some are more open, some are riskier to walk around in at night. You wouldn't apply the same security measures to every neighborhood.
Right. Okay, so we've talked a lot about digital security, but the source also talked about physical security.
Yes, that's an important aspect of overall security.
It is.
We can have the most sophisticated digital safeguards in the world, but if someone can just walk into our building and steal a laptop or tamper with equipment, all those digital safeguards are kind of pointless.
Right. The physical world matters too.
Absolutely.
So what kind of physical security measures are we talking about?
Well, the source mentioned a few. Things like bollards.
Okay, bollards. What are those?
They're those sturdy posts that you often see outside buildings, especially in cities. They're designed to prevent vehicles from crashing into pedestrian areas or into the building itself.
Okay, yeah, I've seen those.
And then there are things like access control vestibules. These are small, enclosed spaces with 2 sets of doors, and you have to be verified at the first door before the second door will open.
It's like an airlock.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
It adds an extra layer of security.
Okay. What else?
Well, fencing is a classic physical security measure. It's a visible deterrent, keeping unauthorized people out. But modern fencing can actually be quite sophisticated, with things like sensors and alarms built in.
Wow.
And then you have video surveillance, of course,
Uh-huh.
security cameras and monitoring systems.
Right.
They provide real-time and recorded footage, which can be really helpful for identifying threats and investigating incidents.
Okay.
And of course, having security guards on site is a crucial part of physical security. They're the ones who can actually enforce security protocols and respond to incidents.
Right. So it's a combination of technology and human presence.
Exactly.
Okay. What about things like access badges?
Ah, yes. Access badges are very common. They often use RFID technology or smart card technology to allow authorized personnel to enter certain areas.
Okay.
And they can also be used to create a log of who went where and when. And sometimes you'll see different colored badges used to easily distinguish between employees and visitors.
Right.
And even something as simple as good lighting around a building can actually be a deterrent to intruders. And it can improve the visibility for security cameras as well.
Right. So it's not just about high-tech gadgets, it's also about the basics.
Exactly. And then you have things like visitor logs,
Right.
where people have to sign in and out.
Yeah.
Again, it's about knowing who's on the premises.
Okay. Now, the source also mentions sensor technologies. What kinds of sensors are we talking about here?
Well, there's a whole range of sensors that can be used for physical security. You have things like infrared sensors, which can detect heat.
Okay.
So if someone crosses a perimeter at night, or if there's movement inside a room, the sensor can pick that up.
Okay.
You also have pressure sensors, which can sense changes in weight or force. So if someone steps on a particular area of the floor, the sensor can detect that. Then you have things like microwave sensors, which emit microwave signals and can detect changes in those signals caused by movement.
Okay.
And then you have ultrasonic sensors, which use high-frequency sound waves to detect motion, even around corners or in areas where visibility is limited.
Wow. So it's like having these invisible eyes and ears everywhere,
It is.
constantly watching and listening. Okay. So we've covered the basics of physical security. Now let's get into something a bit more exciting. The source mentioned deception and disruption technology. That sounds like something out of a spy movie.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So it's a real thing. And it's becoming increasingly popular.
Okay.
It's all about using deception and disruption to throw attackers off balance.
So how does that actually work?
Well, one way is through honeypots.
Honeypots.
Yeah, they're basically decoy websites or systems designed to look like attractive targets, but they're actually traps. So they might have weaker security, or they might contain fake data. And the idea is to lure attackers in.
Okay.
Once an attacker interacts with a honeypot, security teams can monitor their activity, learn about their techniques, and potentially even divert them away from the real targets.
Wow, that's clever.
It's like setting a trap.
Okay, so what about honey nets?
A honey net is a network of honeypots
Okay.
designed to mimic a real network environment.
Okay.
So it's even more enticing to attackers because it looks more realistic.
Yeah.
And it provides a safe environment for security professionals to study attacker behavior, gather intelligence, without putting the real network at risk.
So it's like a playground for hackers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A controlled environment where we can watch them and learn from them.
Okay, the source also mentioned honey files and honey tokens.
Yes, those are like smaller scale traps.
Okay.
A honey file might be a file that's named something like password,
Right.
and it's placed somewhere obvious, hoping that an attacker will try to open it. And then when they do, it triggers an alarm. Honey tokens are similar, but instead of files, they might be fake pieces of data or fake login credentials. If an attacker tries to use them, it's a clear sign of a breach.
So it's all about setting these little traps to catch the bad guys early on. What about fake information? How does that work?
Fake information is all about misleading attackers. So you might create fake documents, fake websites, even fake social media profiles.
Oh, okay.
The idea is to give attackers the wrong information, send them down the wrong path, waste their time.
So instead of just blocking them, we're actively trying to confuse them.
Exactly. And the source even gave an example of a DNS sinkhole.
What's that?
It's kind of like the black hole of the internet. If an attacker tries to connect to a known bad website, the DNS sinkhole intercepts that request and redirects it to a different IP address. Basically, it sends them nowhere.
Oh, so they're trying to go to this malicious website and they just end up at like a blank page?
Something like that. They mentioned fake telemetry too.
Fake telemetry.
So let's say you detect an attacker trying to collect information about your systems.
Okay.
You can feed them false information, mislead them.
Wow. So we're playing mind games with the hackers now.
In a way, yeah.
It's like psychological warfare in the digital world. So deception and disruption technology, it's all about being proactive, throwing attackers off balance, and ultimately protecting our systems.
Exactly.
Okay, wow, we've covered so much ground today.
We have.
From the CIA Triad to non-repudiation, authentication, authorization, accounting, gap analysis, zero trust, physical security, and now deception and disruption technology.
Quite a journey.
It is. And it's amazing how all of these different ideas, from keeping information secret to building physical barriers to even creating those fake digital breadcrumbs for attackers to follow, it all works together.
Yeah, security is multi-layered.
Right.
It's about combining all of these different elements to create a truly robust defense.
So thinking about everything we've discussed today, all these different layers, what do you think is the single most important thing when it comes to building a really strong security posture in today's world?
It's a tough one. It's not just one thing, but I would say it's about having a security-aware mindset,
Okay.
being constantly vigilant, questioning assumptions, and understanding that security is an ongoing process, not just a product you can buy and forget about.
Right. It's about being proactive, staying informed, and always thinking about how to protect yourself and your data.
Exactly.
Well, that's a great note to end on. Thanks so much for taking this deep dive with us.
My pleasure.
Hopefully, this has given you a better understanding of the core principles of security and maybe even spark some ideas about how you can improve your own security practices.
Yeah, and remember, security is a journey, not a destination.
Well said. Thanks for listening, everyone, and stay safe out